Mose Knows fam, fantasy owners everywhere. This is Mose Knows Fantasy. We're going to jump in a second, but you know we got to let that intro rock.
Sorry, Mose couldn't be here, but he doing the Mrs. Mosley thing right now. You know, they're out doing, they're enjoying Valentine's Day is what I was trying to say.
I got you.
Y'all the worst.
You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, but I know that. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, but I know that. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, but I know that. Mose know it all. Mose know it all. I guarantee real takes, ain't no faking that at all. If you don't know, you gon' know. Mose knows, tune into the show. Not a game, nitty gritty, ready go committee. Mose should be the CEO. Too solid, too real, too 100. I'ma keep it real when you don't. This that real gold talk. 24 karat words. San Francisco 49er fam. Realest squad on the earth. The 5 God, number 5, taking us to 6. Young killer Trey Lance. New era, new season. Mose got you covered. Go ahead and subscribe. 2022 this year. Got a whole nother vibe. Mose know it all. Mose know it all. Mose know it all. Tune in for the vibe. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, but I know that. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing, you don't know nothing, but I know that. Mose knows.
Yeah. Back at it. Y'all know how we do here. We're going to review week 12. We're going to preview week 13 and see if there's any changes that we can make to our lineup. So let's jump right into our top performers, as we always do, starting with our quarterbacks. We have none other than Josh Allen. Thanksgiving night, he was 24 of 42, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have 1 interception. He also added 10 carries for 78 yards and a TD. Total fantasy points this week, 29.92. He is our top fantasy quarterback. Our next quarterback on the list, Jalen Hurts, a 10th of a point behind Josh Allen at 29.82 fantasy points in week 12. He was 16 of 28 for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did a lot of damage on the ground, though, 157 yards on 17 carries. What a night for the Eagles quarterback. Moving over to our running backs and our top fantasy performer of the week, Josh Jacobs, 48.3 fantasy points in PPR format. Thank you, Lord. I did not face anybody who had this guy. 229 yards, 2 touchdowns on 33 carries, including the monster game winner in overtime. He also added 74 receiving yards on 6 catches, catching 6 of his 7 targets. What a day for the Raiders running back. He's looking real good heading into free agency. I have a feeling the Raiders going to bring him back, but maybe he don't want to be in Las Vegas anymore. So he going to command some good, big money with some of the performances that he's put up so far in 2022. Another Eagle on the list, Miles Sanders, 31 PPR fantasy points this week, 143 yards and 2 touchdowns on 21 carries. The Packers couldn't stop a nosebleed. They couldn't stop any, run defense was non-existent. He did catch all 3 of his targets for 17 yards. But if you take Jalen Hurts 157 and Miles Sanders 143, they let 2 dudes run for 300 yards. And one of them was a quarterback. That's insane. Absolutely insane. Packers defense got to do better than that. I mean, Jetta's got a home here. Jetta's got a home in Mose Knows top fantasy performers. He caught 9 of his 11 targets, 139 yards and a touchdown. Also on Thanksgiving, 29.3 PPR fantasy points this week. He helped the Vikings get past those pesky Patriots. They played a pretty good game. Vikings ultimately came out on top. Then we have our second wide receiver, Chris Godwin, 29 fantasy points this week in PPR format. He caught 12 of his 13 targets for 110 yards and a touchdown, albeit in a loss to the Browns in OT. Moving over to our tight ends, we got a first-time visitor to the top performers list here. Mose knows tight end Dalton Schultz, Dallas Cowboys. He caught 4 of his 4 targets, 31 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also on Thanksgiving, 19.1 PPR fantasy points in week 12. Then we have Jelani Woods, another first-timer to the top performers list. He caught 8 of his 9 targets for 98 yards. He did not get in the end zone, but in PPR, 17.8 fantasy points this past week. Best kicker in the league, likely will be the best kicker of all time, Justin Tucker. He did everything in his power to have the Ravens win this game. Ultimately, fell a little bit short. He was 4 or 5, and the only miss was a potential game-winning 67-yard field goal. And it wasn't because it was inaccurate and it didn't get blocked. It was straight down the middle. Accuracy was on point. We know Justin Tucker to be accurate, just a little short. I think the field conditions, being outside, maybe a little bit of wind in Jacksonville, it caused that kick to be. If he'd kicked it from 66 or 65, it would have been good. But 67 was just too far out of the reach. Otherwise, solid day. 4 or 5, 55 was his long. And then he made his only extra point attempt, 15 points from Justin Tucker. Singular defensive player. Love this segment of this particular show. Ed Oliver, Buffalo Bills, Thanksgiving Day. 4 solo tackles, 2 assists, 2 tackles for a loss, 1 sack. That sack was also a safety, 2 quarterback hits, a fumble forced, and a fumble recovered. Ed Oliver was a menace on Thanksgiving, 19.3 fantasy points. And then the top defense and special teams unit goes to the Miami Dolphins this week. 18 total fantasy points, 5 sacks, 2 picks, 3 forced fumbles. 1 of those fumbles was recovered and taken to the Baja for a touchdown. They played really, really well, although they were playing against the Texans. That is going to end our top fantasy performers for week 12. Interesting stat. Really, really interesting stat. And that's why I love the singular defensive player who has a dominant game. And I don't believe he's made the list yet. I'll have to go back and double check if he's made any of these lists. I want to say he made it once. I'm not sure. I got to double check. But if I'm looking at fantasy data, just looking at fantasy data, Max Crosby has more total fantasy points. And I've never done it before. And I didn't start including singular defensive fantasy performers until this season, maybe a couple weeks into the start of the 2022 season. And that it was really because there was a player, whoever the first one was, had like 20-something. I think it was like Minkah Fitzpatrick. May have been week 1. Minkah Fitzpatrick had an outstanding game. He had like 20 fantasy points by himself, and it made me want to shine a light on the defensive players. And then there are leagues where you go through and you select a defensive player. You can put a defensive player in a lineup. A lot of times it's linebackers because you get fantasy points for tackles, things of that nature. But Max Crosby, pass rusher for the Las Vegas Raiders, has total fantasy points this year 136.75. Max Crosby's in the top 40. He has more fantasy points than I'm gonna list some of these names: Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, and AJ Brown. He's got more fantasy points than Micah Parsons, and Micah Parsons is top 45 because he's at 43 with 128.5 fantasy points. So I just thought that was an interesting stat, especially with, I mean, we know Russell Wilson is having a bad year. He should be higher. Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, AJ Brown. I know Cooper Kupp is injured, but he hasn't been injured the entire season. His injury is a couple weeks old. AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, for Max Crosby to be top 40 in total fantasy points, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So that was an interesting stat that I saw in my studies in putting this information together for you guys that I figure I might throw out there just so that you know. And I next year, maybe not in my primary league, but I'm probably going to find a league where I can dip my toe into not only having defense and special teams, but also having a defensive starter on my lineup and see if I can mix and match. And that'll be good for the waiver wire, like who to add, who to drop, who to keep, who to hang on to, things of that nature. Do I want to go pass rusher? Do I want to go linebacker for the secure points? So I think it'll be fun to incorporate for Mose Knows Fantasy going into the 2023 season. We won't do that for now. We're deep into the fantasy season, but something we definitely want to incorporate. Yeah, this is going to be a short video. Just quick note on that. The reason why you're getting this as a pre-recording and instead of as a live, I have a conference that I have to go to this evening from 5:30 to 8. So I had the decision of either giving you guys a late live or just pre-record and putting it out. I didn't want to not give you any content. So that's why this is pre-recorded. So this may be a quick one. Let's take a look at what's going on in my fantasy world. So in my primary league, shout out to the Nitty Gritty Niners League. I was scared. It was close. It was really, really close. Pat Fryermuth at the end. I think the catch that he finally caught that put me over the top came in like the late fourth quarter, maybe early fourth. He had a decent first half, and I'm like, okay, it should pick up in the second half. But I think he only caught one pass in the second half. But that one pass, like one catch for 17 yards, finally put me over the hump. So I just barely won by the skin of my teeth. It's not even a full point that I won by, but it doesn't matter. A dub is a dub. We beat Can't Get Right 118.42 to 117.86. Now, it would have been worse. I don't know what I was thinking. I kept Kenyon Drake in the start lineup instead of Brian Robinson from the Commanders. Brian Robinson drops 20 points. And I think I could have who did I have on my bench? I could have put in either Marquise Brown or Tyler Lockett, and they would have given me 7 more points than Drake London did. And I started Cameron Dicker because I was mad at Graham Gano because in week 11, he got me 0 points. And that would have been 6 more points if I'd have started him because he got 11 as opposed to Dicker's 5. So I left 26 and then 7. I left about 33 points on the board. So this could have been a much larger gap of a victory. But we'll take the dub as they come. Here are the current standings. So we got Chain Smokers, aka Tony. He's sitting in first at 9-3. John V and Vince are nipping on his heels at 8-4. And I'm coming in at 6. So I'm right behind my brother Fair. Shout out to Fair. And my brother Mike from Nothing But Niners. So I'm in 6 right now. Sitting at 6-6. So we're at 500. Not as good as we want to do. For a long time, I was first in points scored because of a couple of slow weeks. We've dropped down to third in points scored, but I'm still happy about the production of my team. Some of my losses were just tough losses. Early in the season, y'all know I scored the second most fantasy points the entire week, and it just so happens I played the person who scored the most. So we're looking pretty good heading to the playoffs. If we can, start a winning streak, maybe win 2, 3, maybe 4 in a row, I think we should be pretty good heading into the playoffs. And then let's talk about the upcoming week, week 13. I think we have a good slate of games that are on the docket. Pulling up the schedule right now. I think the teams that are on the bye are the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. So who are you missing? Kyler Murray, who I believe is 9th in total fantasy points. DeAndre Hopkins, who's come back strong. Marquise Brown. DJ Moore. That might be the only person I list. Oh, man. So there are some guys, not too many, with only those 2 teams. So you should fairly have some decent options to start. Who would I look to start? If I'm looking at the matchups and I'm looking at quarterback, obviously the first one that's going to jump out. I know Mike in our league, he jumped on getting Deshaun Watson early, so he has him in the tuck. Some leagues may still have Deshaun Watson out there. I think if you need a quarterback, or if you're unhappy with the mediocre play of the quarterback that you have, I don't see why you can't start Deshaun Watson. Obviously, it's his first game back. He's not in midseason form, but he is a good quarterback. He has a good team, good weapons around him, and he's going back to Houston. I think there's some animosity and some bad blood. Maybe not with the players, because it was a total teardown. So there's new players, new staff in the building, but just the aura of the organization. I think he wants to come in with his new team after the suspension and how all that happened. I think he wants to play really, really well. So I don't see why you can't start Deshaun Watson. Trevor Lawrence for me is another good start option. He's starting to pick it up. We saw what he was able to do, throwing for 300 plus yards against the Baltimore Ravens. Now he gets to play the Detroit Lions, who, although they play good, they play hard. They're known to give up a lot of points. They're known to give up a lot of passing yards. So hopefully we can see more of that progression and maturity from Trevor Lawrence against an opponent that is susceptible to giving up a lot of yards. And then I like Kenny Pickett. He's starting to find his groove going up against an Atlanta Falcons football team whose secondary isn't the best. So he will have options to complete passes down the field. So again, if you are trying to supplement mediocre quarterback play, if you do have a Kyler Murray or a Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield situation where you have that person on the bench and you're not satisfied with the quarterback that you have, or you think that the quarterback that you have is going up against a good defense and you don't want to play them, Kenny Pickett could be a really, really good option. As far as running backs to start, Ramondre Stevenson, again, unless it's a blue chip player, and we know who those top guys are. For example, I have Josh Allen. So I'm not going to sit Josh Allen just because he's playing on Thursday night. I am a little bit leery of picking up those fringe starters for Thursday night games, just because it's a short week and anything can really happen in those games. But Ramondre Stevenson usually has a good game against the Buffalo Bills. We remember what happened last year in a game similar to this, Buffalo going to New England. New England ran all over them. Mac Jones only threw the ball 3 times. Ramondre finds a way to have a good game against Buffalo in order to keep the ball away from that offense. So I would start Ramondre Stevenson. From a wide receiver position, we got a lot of good guys going. Jettis is playing. AJ Brown is playing. Uh, uh, CD Lamb is up this week. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Devontae Adams. We got good wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown from Detroit. I'm looking at George Pickens again. I feel like if Kenny Pickett can have a big day, I think George Pickens going up against Atlanta secondary could be a part of that. And then I mentioned Trevor Lawrence. So I think Zay Jones, as Trevor Lawrence is maturing and finding who his go-to receiver is, I believe on this offense this year, that's Zay Jones. He's going to get the most volume of targets. And again, against that Detroit secondary, he has an option to have a pretty big day, particularly in PPR leagues. Who would I think about sitting? Quarterbacks. Matt Ryan going up against the Dallas defense on the road. Micah Parsons is going to pin his ears back and go crazy because I don't know if y'all saw him Monday night. He's a statue. And even when he tries to get out of the pocket, he goes absolutely nowhere. So Matt Ryan got to take a seat. And then just looking at the offense from watching that Monday night game, I mean, yeah, Jelani Woods was on the top performers because of the amount of catches, and he had 98 yards. But that offense looked so bad. Like they could not move the ball. Credit to the Steelers defense. But there was just no creativity in that Colts offense. So Matt Ryan, take a seat. Andy Dalton, Saints versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is so up and down. Obviously, this is a divisional game. Tampa Bay needs to figure out a way to get on some type of run going into the playoffs and to wipe, the sour taste of losing in overtime to the Browns without Deshaun Watson. Andy Dalton got to take a seat. I'm sure a lot of people have already sat Russell Wilson. If you have not sat Russell Wilson, sit him down. That Denver offense is absolutely terrible. I don't expect it to change playing against Baltimore on the road. He got to go. Running backs. Sit all of the Miami running backs. And I'm not just saying it as a Niner fan because I feel like my Niners are going to blow them out. That's not why. This is going to be a chess match between Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel, but also D'Amico Ryans and Mike McDaniel. These are two coaching staffs that know each other very, very well. Obviously, Miami has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So you would think the 49ers would want the Dolphins to run the ball instead of throwing it all over the field and killing us with speed. But part of the Kyle Shanahan prototypical offense that was helped developed by Mike McDaniel is incorporating the running game and using the running game to set up those passes. So I feel like if we're able to stop the running game, force Tua and that offense into third and long situations, yeah, that means they have to pass a lot, but that means Nick Bosa and the rest of our defensive line can make Tua uncomfortable by collapsing the pocket and getting after the passer. I feel like and especially our defense, knowing that we're going up against possibly two former 49er running backs and Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert, our defense has a certain level of pride where we not going to let them go crazy. It's about bragging rights at this point. So I would sit the Miami running backs. I don't think either of them will have over 100 yards. And there may be one touchdown between the two of them. I don't think they have more than one. So I would sit the Miami backs, both of them, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert. That's just me. Moving to the wide receivers. Wide receiver Treylon Burks. Tennessee is going to Philadelphia. I feel one of the things that I've learned in watching the NFL and watching football, there's definitely an emotional component towards these games. AJ Brown facing his former team with his new team, I think there's going to be added juice and fuel to his fire to perform and perform well. Um, to show his former team how much of an asset they got rid of. So I think there's going to be pressure for Traylon Burks to try to match and top that energy, because I don't think he's going to be able to do it. But then when you look at Philly's defense, Traylon Burks is probably going to command Darius Slay. The way Traylon has played in previous weeks, he's their number one wide receiver, you could say. So he's going to draw a lot of attention from Darius Slay. So we got a rookie going up against Darius Slay with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson roaming behind him. Sit Traylon Burks down. Other wide receivers, DK Metcalf. I think Seattle is probably going to try to run the ball a lot, especially with Aaron Donald not being there. You would say, well, he's more of a pass rusher, but Aaron Donald affects the game all over the place because he gets so much pressure. He affects the running game. And while there are some injuries, Jalen Ramsey is still playing. So Jalen Ramsey across from DK Metcalf, we always know that's a dynamite matchup. So I feel like Seattle's going to lean on Kenneth Walker III a little bit more. So that may take some targets away from DK Metcalf, especially when you have Jalen Ramsey across from you. I want to say sit the 49ers receivers too. I have Brandon Ayuk on my notes, just because Brandon Ayuk is probably going to command a lot of Xavier Howard's attention with the Dolphins. But I think in the same way that we try to stop Miami's running game, I think, again, that emotional component, I feel like Kyle Shanahan is going to want to establish the running game, because a lot of the talk, particularly in 49er circles, is Kyle Shanahan's run game isn't as effective as it was in previous years because Mike McDaniel isn't there. And Mike McDaniel is really the architect of Kyle Shanahan's successful running game over the previous years in San Francisco. So that component of ego, along with the way you keep that high-powered track offense off the field, is to run the ball and control clock. I feel like we're going to see a different type of running game. So that may mean not as many passes from the 49ers offense. And even if we do, a secondary that has Xavier Howard, Javon Holland, Noah Igbenogany, the secondary is pretty decent. Secondary is pretty decent. So I would say maybe you see Brandon Ayuk. I think we see more Deebo Samuel, not as far as receptions in PPR, but you're going to see him bubble screens, end arounds, him getting the ball out of the backfield to help the running backs, like we've seen in previous years and previous games. So yeah, I mean, I sit the Miami backs, but maybe sit those 49ers pass catchers as well. That's going to be a good game, though. I'm looking at that as game of the week. Both teams, Miami 5-game winning streak, 49ers 4-game winning streak. Somebody's streak's coming to an end. I just hope it's not ours. Tight ends, do what you do, figure it out. I mean, we got some good ones going. We got Freiermuth, we got Cole Kmet. Is Dallas Goedert going to play for Philly? Is he still nicked up? Mark Andrews is back. David Njoku, again, Cleveland versus Houston. I guess you can't sit George Kittle against Miami. If we do, and if we do pass, I think we take advantage of the linebacker core with George Kittle, Travis Kelce, obviously. Listen, the Colts play the Cowboys. We had Dalton Schultz and Jelani Woods. on our tight ends for this week. So again, those are really good options as well. So tight end, do what you do, see what you can find. We got some good ones going this week. That is going to wrap it up for Mose Knows Fantasy for this week. Again, if you have any questions about your fantasy lineup, if you're having issues or you're struggling with, making a decision of who to go with and who not to go with, hit me on my social media. Follow me on Twitter and IG, What Mose Knows. You can shoot me a DM on either one of those platforms. You can shoot me an email, what.mose.knows@gmail.com. You can also give me a follow over on my TikTok. Just type in Mose Knows in the search bar and it'll come up. And then if you're here watching this video, if you made it through to the end, first of all, thank you for your time and attention. I greatly appreciate it. Throw a like on this video and then comment below with your fantasy questions. Any questions that you have about fantasy, comment below on this video. I'll make sure we pull those up and get to answering those questions before the game starts tonight. And then before, I'll try to get those questions answered Saturday before Sunday's games right here, youtube.com/Mose Knows. Also, subscribe to the channel. Become a part of the Mose Knows fan. Want your family? I love you. And there's nothing you can do about it. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week. Peace.